Los libros nos unen. La Feria Universitaria de la máxima Casa de Estudios de Nuevo León lanza su programa general en línea para unir ciudades, países y lectores. Con Centroamérica Cuenta y la red de librerías independientes como invitados, UAN Leer se consolida una vez más como una fuente de diálogo y encuentros alrededor de la literatura. Del 17 al 21 de marzo, accede libremente a presentaciones, conferencias, ceremonias especiales, conciertos, exposiciones, entrevistas, funciones de videoteatro y a una oferta editorial al alcance de un clic. Consulta nuestra programación en uanleer.uanl.mx y sigue las transmisiones en vivo desde las redes sociales de Cultura UANL, Casa Universitaria del Libro, UAN Leer y Canal 53. Este 2021, los libros nos unen.
Buenas tardes. Quiero dar las gracias a la Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León, a la Secretaría de Educación y Cultura y a la Feria del Libro de la Universidad UAN Leer. Quiero agradecer especialmente a nuestro poeta invitado el día de hoy, Charles Simic, autor de nuestra casa editorial, además de ser un ser entrañable, un gran poeta y admirado por todos nosotros. Me permito leer una semblanza del poeta. Charles Simic emigró con su familia a los Estados Unidos en 1954, en donde reside desde entonces. Es uno de los mayores de las voces contemporáneas más altas en lengua inglesa y autor de luminosos ensayos sobre literatura y cine. Ha sido galardonado con numerosos premios, entre ellos el Premio Pulitzer de Poesía en 1990, la beca al genio de la Fundación MacArthur, el Griffin International Poetry Prize y el Wallace Stevens Award. Entre octubre de 2007 y mayo de 2008 fue también poeta laureado de los Estados Unidos. Hasta hace 2 años fue profesor en la Universidad de New Hampshire y escribe habitualmente en el blog del New York Times Review of Books. Desde hace ya 11 años, Vaso Roto ha venido publicando su obra. Tenemos 5 libros de poesía del autor: El mundo no se acaba, Acércate y escucha, Garabateando en la oscuridad, El lunático y Mis éxitos silenciosos. Y en ensayo y en prosa tenemos Una mosca en la sopa, El monstruo ama su laberinto, que son aforismos luminosos, y La vida de las imágenes, un bello libro en donde cada vez vemos a un Charles Simic más adentrándose en su propia interioridad y cada vez revelando más sus impresiones y percepciones sobre la poesía. Charlie, how are you? Very happy to have you here at the University of Nuevo León.
I'm very happy to be there.
Thank you. Charlie, if you want us to, we can converse a little bit on poetry, then we can do a reading of some poems, and then if we have time, we shall come back and still talk a little bit more.
Okay.
Okay. There are so many things that we could talk about, but I would like to concentrate, Charlie, in something that I have read that you have said many times, and and which is something that you have been asked a lot, which means when you left your country and you came into the United States, you did not start as a poet. You started as an artist. Can you talk to us about this a little bit?
That's true. I mean, I didn't start as a poet. When I was in my teens, I mean, well, actually, even earlier, we spent a year in Paris, 1953 to 1954, before coming to the United States. My father was in the United States, but you know how with visa and so forth, we had to wait a whole year. And we lived in a hotel room. I mean, my mother and my brother and I, and there was, it was pretty boring. I mean, we went to school for a little bit, but it was very tough to be in French school with my knowledge of French. And so I started drawing, and I started drawing American cars because, coming from communist Yugoslavia, I mean, what the most delightful thing to see about Paris were all these terrific Buicks and Cadillacs and DeSotos, and I started drawing cars. And after that, well, we spent a lot of time because we didn't have much money, and so my mother would take us to museums. My brother is younger. He was 6 years younger. So we went to museums, and of course we went to all the obvious museums. It's a lot of art, and I liked looking at art, and I didn't do much of it. I mean, I just did drawing and some crayons in the hotel room. But when I came to the United States, not right away. Eventually, I bought some watercolors and started, drawing and sort of painting. When we came to New York, my father had a job which was basically in Chicago. So we're there a year in New York, and then we moved to Chicago. I had an apartment, and that's when I started painting. The suburb of Chicago, which is called Oak Park, Illinois, had an incredible library, public library, and incredibly generous. I mean, what was great about it, you could go and get these huge art books, like French Impressionism, very heavy book, huge book. You could take 3 of those and take them home, and and look at the pictures and look at the pictures. And that's what I did, and then after watercolors, I started painting oil paintings, and I painted quite a bit. Then I moved to New York in 1958 by myself. I left Chicago, I came to New York, and continued to paint even more intensively, except I was living in small rooms, and it was sort of very difficult to have anything like a studio and so forth. But I did. I painted quite a bit, and I was living in Greenwich Village. I used to go to a place just a few doors from where I was living called Cedar Tavern, very famous tavern on University Place, where de Kooning and Pollock and all the abstract expressionists used to go there, and drink. And so, they made me even more interested in painting because, I mean, they were the living legends, So I painted till I was 30 years old. But then, of course, it became impossible because of, I didn't have the space. But what I retained from painting, I mean, when I was painting in these rooms, I could only paint on small canvases because it was the room. So I would go out and get something really, really small and paint. And that kind of translated into my poetry. I mean, my poems are not very long by and large, and you put everything in that little space. And I always feel, when I'm writing a poem, and it's framed by white space, and then you have to put something in the middle, So that was that, and of course I continue to, love painting, art. I've wrote about art quite a bit when I was writing for New York Review of Books, and but most of the work that I did was to the age of 30.
So that's quite interesting, because that means that the surface of the canvas or of the paper has to do with what you had at the time.
Exactly.
And that obliged you to be more economic in your writing too.
Yeah.
And to write with images.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. The visual thing is very important.
Yes. Also, when you talk in The Life of Images, when you talk about Emily Dickinson,
yeah,
you say that it's important not what you say, or half of what you think it's said, and the other half is not said. Mm-hmm. And then you take as an example Emily Dickinson. And I have, because so many people are going to be listening to you. For instance, I had a Guinea Golden. I lost it in the sand, and though the sum was simple and pounds were in the land, still had it such a value unto my frugal eye, that when I could not find it, I sat me down to sight. So I can see images here, but when you talk about her, you also talk about Heidegger. How can we relate your poetry to silence and to image, or is it that instead of words, you would use silence and an image? Can you talk about this in the confirmation of your poetics?
Well, my view has always been less is more. I don't like poems that go on for a great length, although I've written some long poetic sequences. But to me, the mystery is how 2 or 3 lines on a page, what effect they can make. I mean, I've always been, stunned, with many millions of others, by the Japanese, the haiku. The simplest things, like, for example, there's one, I think it's by Isa, where he says, geese honking overhead, geese are flying. And then he says, no blanket can cover them now. Bottom night, geese honking overhead, no blanket can cover them now. Well, that second part of the poem is pure genius. You cannot, with your brain, calculate that. It just pops into your head, and you have to have a sort of confidence to say, this is the ideal solution to this little thing. So I love this minimalist stuff. I love the economy. I love, poems that out of nothing, I mean, the subject is nothing much of a subject, they suddenly explode. I mean, that's all I can say.
Do you think, Charlie, because you have also said that since you were very young, you were 2 years old, you were hiding under the beds, bombs were falling over the roof of your home, and so you decided, which is a very wise decision to me, and obviously it was to you, not to go over and over and over the suffering of the past years or of the past. So it's like cleaning, like doing a cleaning at your room, at your house. You cut out everything that is not essential, and then you synthesize and give the essential. But where does silence come in? Why Heidegger? Is there a thought in the images?
No, I mean, there was a time when I was interested in Heidegger, but I mean, I had also a lot of problems with Heidegger. I mean, he's not exactly my favorite philosopher, but he had interesting ideas. But I never, was interested in following Heidegger.
Okay.
No. What can I tell you also about why I never wrote about the suffering, the fears and so forth and so on. There's I have a terrible thing to confess. I mean, when the war started, for us, in 1941, 6th of April, I was 3 years old. Bomb fell across the street, destroyed the building. 5 in the morning, I flew out of bed on the floor with glass from the window and so forth. And beyond that, I mean, it was a German occupation, civil war in Yugoslavia, about 5 or 6 different factions. Terrible, atrocities. You go out in the main boulevard in Belgrade, and there would be, people hanging from lampposts because, Germans used to, for every German hurt, there would be 100 people just taken and hung or shot. So despite these horrors, I mean, these atrocities and everything else, which came, that's what you got. I had a very good time during the Second World War. My mother has a story which I don't remember saying that, but she said this was the 9th of May, and the war was finished in Europe. Hitler, 1945, and I always used to play on the street. We lived in the center of town, building 4 floors, and I was constantly on the street. And so the only reason I would come home, I mean, by this time I was 45, 7 years old, I would run up to drink water, run in the kitchen and then, drink some water and then down, And she said, they listened to the radio, she and some neighbors, the war has ended. And she said, come on, stay, the war has ended. And she says that I said, now there won't be any good times anymore, or something to that effect. So I was very puzzled by this. I mean, that I said something like that. And my mother will always use that as an example. What an idiot his son is. What a dumb idiot. So many years later, I was at some party in New York City, and I started talking to a woman who was Polish. And she was in Poland during, the end of the war there in Warsaw, horrible stuff and so forth. And so I told her that, I mean, about how I felt about the war. I'm going to miss it. And she said, He said, "That Charlie," says, you forgot the most important thing." I said, "What is it?" He says, "We didn't have to go to school." If we were lucky, our schools were bombed.
So this is the sense of humor that permeates your poetry.
Yeah, you could say that.
Because it was very different, like for Paul Celan.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there were older people, and there were really horrible things. I mean, my mother certainly, even my father, didn't think there was anything very funny about the war, you know.
Okay, Charlie, do you think we can read some of your poems? We can start by the one. Do you have them numbered?
I have them in order.
It starts a poem about sitting on a New York. Yeah.
An untitled poem from a book called "The World Doesn't End."
Yes.
Yeah. A poem about sitting on a New York rooftop on a chill autumn evening, drinking red wine, surrounded by tall buildings, the little kids running dangerously to the edge, the beautiful girl everyone's secretly in love with sitting by herself. She will die young, but we don't know that yet. She has a hole in her black stocking, big toe showing, toe painted red. And the skyscrapers in the failing light, like new Chaldeans, Pythonesses, Cassandras, because of their many blind windows.
Okay, I will read it in Spanish. I love the part where it says the little kid running dangerously to the edge. Un poema que habla de estar sentado en un tejado de Nueva York en una noche fría de otoño, bebiendo vino tinto, rodeado de edificios altos, niños que corren peligrosamente cerca de la cornisa y la hermosa joven de la que todos estarán secretamente enamorados, sentada a solas. Morirá joven, pero nosotros aún no lo sabemos. Tiene un agujero en sus medias negras y el dedo gordo asoma con la uña pintada de rojo. Y los rascacielos, al declinar la luz, como nuevos caldeos, pitonisas, casandras, por sus muchas ventanas ciegas. De El mundo no se acaba. As number 2, I want from Come Closer and Listen.
Many Lauras. Many Lauras. Alas, I burn and am not believed. Petrarch. I loved 3 different Lauras at one time or another. They laughed at everything I said, while I shed tears in secret. Even in church praying, they'd smile at the memory of me. Even in the arms of another man, they'd hide their grins, or so I imagined, because I never laid my eyes on them again. It was a huge city where one got lost easily, as they must have done. Petrarch, you only loved one Laura and wrote hundreds of poems to her. I loved 3, but wrote only one, and it's not even a good one.
Las traducciones de este libro, perdón, son de Nieves García Prados. Y la traducción que leyó el primer poema es de Jordi 12. Las muchas Lauras tiene un epígrafe de Petrarca. Ay, me quemo y no me creen. Amé a 3 Lauras diferentes. En un momento u otro se reían de todo lo que decía mientras derramaba mis lágrimas en secreto. Hasta cuando rezaban en la iglesia sonreían al recordarme. Hasta en los brazos de otro hombre ocultaban el gesto. O eso me imaginaba yo, porque nunca volví a verlas de nuevo. Era en una gran ciudad donde uno se perdía fácilmente, como seguramente debió pasarles a ellas. Petrarca, tú solo amaste a una Laura y le escribiste cientos de poemas. Yo amé a 3, pero solo escribí uno y ni siquiera bueno.
Swept away. Melville had the sea and Poe his nightmares to thrill them and haunt them. And you have the faces of strangers glimpsed once and never again. Like that woman whose eye you caught on a crowded street in New York, who spun around after she went by as if you had just seen a ghost, leaving you with a memory of her hand rising to touch her flustered face and muffle what might have been something she was saying as she was swept away.
De Garabateado en la oscuridad, con traducción también de Nieves García Prados. Arrastrada, Melville tenía el mar y Poe sus pesadillas para conmoverlos y perseguirlos, y tú tienes los rostros de los extraños vislumbrados una sola vez, como aquella mujer con la que cruzaste la mirada en una abarrotada calle de Nueva York y que giró a tu paso como si acabara de ver un fantasma. Te dejó el recuerdo de su mano levantándose para tocar su rostro aturdido y disimular lo que podría haber sido algo que estaba diciendo mientras era arrastrada.
The light. Our thoughts like it quiet in this snowbird dawn, like the way the early light takes the world as it finds it and makes no comment about the apples the wind has blown off a tree, or the horse broken loose from a fenced field, grazing quietly among the tombstones in a small family graveyard.
La luz. A nuestros pensamientos les gusta el silencio, en este amanecer sin pájaros, el modo en que la luz temprana toma el mundo tal cual y no hace comentarios sobre las manzanas que el viento hizo caer de un árbol o el caballo que se ha escapado de su cerca y está pastando tranquilamente entre las tumbas de un camposanto familiar. This is so beautiful.
This is New Hampshire. It's New Hampshire. There are a lot of small graveyards, going back centuries. And let's see, we are now My Little Heaven, right?
Yes.
My Little Heaven. This is actually a New York poem about a beautiful little park called Gramercy Park. Tiny place, but fenced, as I described it. You have to have a key to get in. I mean, the local people who live around Gramercy Park, they have keys so they can go in. And so you walk around and you see this, well, as I described it, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. My Little Heaven. Why the wrought iron fence with nasty-looking spikes and 4 padlocks and a chain securing the heavy gate? I stop by from time to time to check if it's unlocked and peek through the bars at rows of pretty flowers and its tree-lined promenade streaked with sunlight. One little bird hopping on it, tickled pink about something.
Charlie, in which book is that poem, My Little Heaven?
My Little Heaven, I don't know. Let me see. Yeah, I got it. It's in the last book, this one.
Come closer and listen.
Yeah, on
Okay.
page 78.
78.
79, yeah.
Yes. Mi pequeño paraíso, de su último libro de poesía que publicó Vaso Roto, que es una joya, también en traducción de Nieves García Prados. Mi pequeño paraíso, ¿por qué esta verja de hierro forjado con púas de aspecto terrible y 4 candados y una cadena para asegurar la pesada entrada? Me paso por allí de vez en cuando para revisar si está abierta y mirar entre los barrotes las hileras de flores hermosas y su paseo arbolado con un ribete de luz solar. Un pajarillo salta sobre ella, feliz y contento por algo.
The last lesson. It will be about nothing. Not about love or God, but about nothing. You'll be like a new kid in school, afraid to look at the teacher, while struggling to understand what they are saying about this here, nothing.
This is so beautiful. También los poemas, este y el que sigue, son de Acércate y escucha, Come Closer and Listen, en traducción de Nieves García Prados. La última lección, no tratará sobre nada, no tratará sobre el amor o Dios, sino sobre nada. Serás como el niño nuevo de la escuela, temeroso de mirar al profesor, mientras te esfuerzas por entender lo que están diciendo sobre esta nada de aquí.
And the final poem. This is one of those kind of things where you are, it's just a beautiful, beautiful day, and you're in a good mood, and the sun is shining, everything is wonderful. The birds are singing, and then you open a newspaper, and your mood changes. After the bombing, a great city lay reduced to ruins as you stirred in a hammock, closing your eyes and letting the paper you were reading fall out of your hand to the ground, where the afternoon breeze took an interest in it and swept it back and forth across the lawn toward the neighboring woods, so the owls can study the headlines as soon as night comes and shriek from time to time, making mice shake in their beds.
Después del bombardeo, una gran ciudad quedó reducida a ruinas, mientras tú te balanceabas en la hamaca, cerrando los ojos y dejando caer el periódico que estabas leyendo de tu mano al suelo, donde la brisa de la tarde se interesó por él y se lo llevó de un lado a otro por todo el césped y hacia los bosques cercanos, para que los búhos pudieran estudiar los titulares tan pronto como llegase la noche y dar chillidos de vez en cuando, haciendo temblar a los ratones en sus lechos. Charlie, maybe
Yes.
this I love all of your work. This book in particular, even though the images like in this last poem we are reading, and you take the newspaper as a metaphor, did something happen in your life before you wrote this book?
No, I mean, no, it's this is a kind of a thing that one is always confronted with this. I mean, I remember, when I was young in New York City, and there would be, Saturday night, it was a great evening. You end up in some friend's house with some people, and everything is beautiful. You get out on the street 3 o'clock in the morning, walking home, and the New York Times, the Sunday New York Times, used to be available Saturday night before Sunday, and you pick up the paper, which is way a ton, and you go back home, and get in bed eventually, and you feel awful. I mean, this is the Vietnam War, for example, and you see that, what's going on, all the awful things that have occurred that day, and so this has always been haunting me, because I mean, I started out in the world of cruelty and tragedy. I mean, constant tragedy, and then even when you were happiest, suddenly it creeps up to you.
When you came to Guadalajara a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
you told me that you had stopped teaching just recently.
Yeah.
And then it dawned on me that I had seen you at the Cervantes Institute of Nueva York.
Yeah.
And so poets in the United States are always teaching, and that is a way that they get more the opportunity to read more, be more prepared to teach, and there are not so many encounters of poetry readings. So I remember that evening you said you had to leave. You lived about an hour away from home, and you had to teach. What you said is, "I'm leaving. I have to teach at 8 in the morning." Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I mean, teaching was great because you make a living.
But also what you said about Chicago, about the art books, Charlie, does it still happen? Those libraries in the US that are like temples, is it still happening?
No.
No.
No, it is not, especially now in the days of pandemic. All the libraries are closed. If you want to borrow a book from university library, you have to send a request through email, and then to pick up the book, you have to go to the town library of the university town, and then there's a book there waiting for you. So in other words, there's no chance anymore to roam through the library and just search shelves, And I mean that library at University of New Hampshire, which is a pretty good library. I mean, I got most of my education there. They had fantastic stuff. I mean, for example, one day I discovered that they had a complete copies of the Surrealist magazine. I forget the one that Breton published in the 20s, and complete, and it was really, these were places where you really could get educated. And for a long time, the American libraries were in very good shape because, well, the local governments gave a lot of money to them. And then slowly, I would say the last 20 years, with the computers and cell phones, people don't come to libraries anymore. I mean, if you go to a library nowadays, they're all closed, by the way, right now. But it will be older people, and but libraries were a big part of not just mine, but every American writer's background.
Yes, that's what I think of the United States. I think that I studied there for 6 years, and we always had libraries available. The book did not have to do with reading or not reading because of the price of the book. It had to do with libraries furnishing and letting students, providing the students with the real material to. So I think that we should campaign again.
Yeah,
The libraries to have a sufficient fund to provide the students with the right material.
Actually, in this COVID thing that they're passing just tonight, the help that they're giving people in the United States, there is a fairly good amount left to support the libraries.
Good.
Yeah, so one good thing.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Do you remember that you came to Mexico City with when the 100 years of the birth of Octavio Paz?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. Were you in touch with Octavio Paz for some time?
Oh yes, I knew. How did I meet Octavio Paz? Octavio Paz I met through my friend
Vasco Popa.
Vasco Popa. Vasco Popa, and then another good friend, Mark Strand.
Yes.
And so I met him in New York, and then I met him a couple other places. But he came to teach at Harvard.
Yes.
Every fall semester, and we live here a couple hours from Harvard. So he was very lonely there. I mean, it was kind of none of the other faculty had any interest in him. I don't know if he knew who he was, and so it was great. Go down there, and his wife, Marie Jose, right?
Yes.
And we would go to bookstores. I mean, make the rounds of bookstores. I mean, really. I mean, Harvard in those days had about a dozen bookstores, and so you really talk about everything. And we then go to a Basque restaurant, and again sit for hours. And he was really lots of fun. I mean, he would remember. I mean, you talked a lot. You talked about Heidegger. You mentioned Heidegger. We talked a lot about Heidegger at one point, but you would not. For example, I would not see him from. He would leave in January. He goes back to Mexico, and I would not meet him till next fall. And he'd say to me, the moment he saw me, I ring the bell, and he's Charlie. He says, Charlie, that's what you said about, what you said about Descartes, if you remember, I really like what you said about Descartes, but I've been thinking about it, and I changed my mind, It's great. I mean, it's terrific, Yeah.
So you used to have nice talks, and I remember too that you knew Thomas Chalamun.
Oh yeah.
that he lived in Mexico.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, and Mark Strand passed his last years in Madrid.
Yeah, I know.
Do you plan on visiting Mexico, Spain, or a Spanish-speaking country soon?
I mean, because it's very unclear what, you know.
After the COVID.
Yeah, well, hopefully after the COVID, certainly.
Would you come to the University of Nuevo León then?
I mean, you know, right now it's very difficult.
Let's think about the year 22 or 23, okay?
Okay.
Well, we want to thank you so much, Charlie.
And I want to thank you.
And we will send you this recording, Lynn. She will do it, and hope to see you in Monterrey sometime.
Okay.
Charlie, thank you for your reading.
Wait, before we leave, I just wanted to say, to close the event, I wanted to say goodbye, Jeannette, just because we can't mention in the recording that we're recording. So we're going to have to cut that part off, but don't worry. Let me just say some last words before we close the event.
En español?
I'm going to say some words in English for Charlie, and then I'll say some words in Spanish. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm going to like have 10 seconds. I'm going to count 10 seconds, and then I'll start speaking. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, just give me a minute. Well, thank you, sir, for such a wonderful poetry reading. Charles, we are very happy and fortunate to have had your presence during this one 2021. And I love the fact that you guys finished this event with 2 poems from a book that you mentioned, that's Come Closer and Listen. I think that's such a beautiful message, in particular for all the students here. And well, in Spanish, acércate, escucha, ¿no? Entonces acérquense y escuchen, y qué bonito mensaje. And also the fact when you were talking about libraries and bookstores, it's precisely what this book fair is wanting to share with the whole community. And it's the fact that books unite us, that literature unites us, and it makes us a whole community, right? So, well, I'm so pleased that we had this event. Thank you so much, Charles, for being with us today.
Thank you too.
And bueno, nos despedimos entonces de esta transmisión. Agradecemos bastante que nos hayan acompañado. Muchísimas gracias a Jeannette Clariond, directora de Ediciones Vaso Roto. Nos despedimos, no sin antes recordarles que de igual manera los distintos títulos que cuenta Ediciones Vaso Roto de este poeta se encuentran a la venta y podrán tener acceso a ellos en el link que se comparte en esta misma publicación. Los invitamos a que sigan al tanto de los eventos que restan de este último día de la Feria Universitaria del Libro UANLEER 2021. Hasta la próxima. Gracias.